Howdy, and welcome to LeeReads, where I talk about the books I've been reading and enjoying lately. And I wrote a list. I've been seeing some videos lately, 24 books for 2024, so I thought I would sit down with a blank sheet of paper and write the first 24 books that came to my mind that I really want to read sometime this year, whether these are ones that I've been meaning to get to for a while, or they're new ones that I'm excited about. The only books that I didn't put on this list are ones that I already have the arcs for, because I know that I will get to them. So there's a pretty good division. The different colors are different genres. I won't spend too much time summarizing them, but if something looks or sounds interesting to you, then let me know and we can talk about it in the comments. The first is Helm of Midnight, which is a fantasy horror. The premise is that when people die, there are death masks created for them. So famous artists, painters, whatever, get a death mask made. And this story is about one that was made for a murderer, and then it goes missing, and similar murders start popping up around the city. I think that premise sounds really cool. Stormlight number 5 by Brandon Sanderson. I know it has a title. I haven't looked up what the title is, but it should be coming out in 2024. This is the conclusion of an arc. It's the halfway point in the series. The next is Diviners number 2. I promise they're not all sequels. Liar of Dreams by Libba Bray, the continuation of the Diviners series. Now some of the Diviners have gone public with the abilities that they have. Others of them want to keep their abilities a secret, and yet there is another string of murders popping up around 1920s New York City. Mask of Mirrors. This fantasy trilogy, I think it's a trilogy, is now complete, and I've heard such great things, and I've had the ebook sitting on my Kindle for a long time. I hear it's very political. It's about a con artist who tries to con her way into this wealthy family for whatever her reasons are, but it turns out that the family is not wealthy at all, so they're trying to con her in return. There's a lot of political intrigue, and I've heard the magic systems and the world building is really interesting, but you really have to pay attention to it, which is I think why I haven't gotten to it yet. But now the trilogy is complete, and it's time to read the first one. Defiant, which is Skyward book number 4, came out last year, and I would like to read this last book in the series, not only to find out what happens, but also to finish a series. And then starting a couple of new science fiction series. The first that I've been hearing a lot about, Silence of Empire, the first of the Sun Eater series. I don't know too much about it, other than it's, I think, a space opera, sort of a revenge tale that has been comped to Red Rising, but different. And there are many books in the series, and they all seem highly regarded. And then a classic one, Shadow and Claw, Books of the New Sun by Gene Wolfe. Another science fiction series that's said to be a masterpiece, something that I would really want to focus on as I'm reading, and I feel ready to take that on. Switching back to fantasy real quick, Bride of Death. I did talk about this one in my anticipated releases videos. The twist between Catherine Arden and Naomi Novik, both of which are some of my favorite authors, and that was really enough to get me to want to pick it up. Another with a slightly horror bent by T. Kingfisher is What Moves the Dead. It's a fantasy horror novella, but there's actually going to be a sequel to it coming out. So I'd like to read the first one, maybe around the fall, but we'll see. I know that it's available at my library whenever I'm ready to read it. Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. I read Piranesi at the very beginning of last year, which was my first book by that author, and I enjoyed Piranesi so much more than I thought I would. I've started Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell before, and I couldn't really get into it. I think it was just too dense for me at the time, but I really want to try it again because this is another novel that people seem to really like. I just need to give it a real chance. I don't think I gave it enough of a chance the first time. Lighthearted romance, hopefully, is Emily Henry's new book called Funny Story. I've enjoyed every Emily Henry. She writes contemporary romances, but they can get quite deep emotionally. I think they're very well done. I'm hoping that this one is a little bit more lighthearted since it's called Funny Story, but Knowing Emily Henry, that's probably ironic. It's probably not a funny story. Historical fantasy, and this one seems very random. A Morbid Taste for Bones. It's about this monk in an old monastery that needs to investigate a murder, and I've heard that it's charming, and I do like an investigation subplot in my stories, so I'm hoping that I'll enjoy that one, even though that's kind of outside the wheelhouse. Speaking of investigation kind of thriller, supernatural-ish stories, Simone St. James has a new release coming out this year called Murder Road. That's about a married couple that's taking a road trip and murders keep happening. That's all I know. I'm trying not to read too much of that back cover. And the last mystery, but a cozy one, is The Thursday Murder Club. This is a group about a group of older friends in England who apparently get together on a Thursday afternoon and have tea and talk about old unsolved murders. I'm not quite sure, but they end up starting to solve them in their village. I get Hot Fuzz vibes from it, and I know that the author is somewhat of a comedian, so I think that this one would be a good time. The end of my list are various mixes of science fiction and fantasy. I've wanted to read something by Robert Jackson Bennett for a while. I was thinking Foundry Side, which is a fantasy that has a cool magic system, and I also hear people talk of City of Stairs, but apparently there's a new novel coming out by him this year, The Tainted Cup, which I think is more of a fantasy side, but the main character has to investigate a murder. I think you're seeing a theme here. So I may pick that one up first, but let me know between Foundry Side and City of Stairs, either one of those. Should I go for one of those instead? A couple of novellas. The Spear Cuts Through Water, I've heard, is a very imaginative way of storytelling. It builds on oral traditions, and so those oral traditions and the theme of storytelling itself is woven through different layers into the story, which I thought sounded like an interesting thing to explore, but I don't know too much about the plot. Another novella is Ring Shout by P. Jelly Clark. This is a novel where the members of the Ku Klux Klan actually have Ku Kluxes, or like demons, in them, and the main character is black and is a demon killer or a Ku Klux killer. I think that's my understanding of the premise, but I've heard a lot of people talk very highly about Ring Shout as kind of a horror fantasy. Wanting to explore some backlist, I picked up Mystic and Rider by Sharon Shin as some sort of nostalgic, cozy, classic reading fantasy. The Scourge Between Stars is a science fiction horror that came out last year. It's about this woman who is the captain on this spaceship. I'm not sure if it's like an arc ship or not, but they encounter another ship adrift, I think, and then the horror elements really start, and the captain has to try to hold it all together as people are either going mad or there's some sort of devastation occurring on board the ship, and it's a very isolated setting. I was attracted by the cover of this forthcoming fantasy called The Honey Witch. I was intrigued because of the idea of bees, beekeeping, apiary, and also the fact that they are a witch with the honey. I don't know much about the story. I'm intrigued by the cover and the title, and we'll be checking that one out this year when it comes out. I mentioned before that Catherine Arden is one of my favorite authors. I really loved her The Bear and the Nightingale trilogy that she did. I haven't read anything else from her but those books, but I don't know that she's published anything since then. She's taken a couple years to write her next release, which is coming out this year. It's called The Warm Hands of Ghosts. It has to do with World War I or II and these siblings. I'm going to read it because she wrote it. Another new release. I've never read anything by Cassandra Clare. She writes a lot of young adult apparently, but she just had her adult debut called Swordcatcher release. I've heard that this one is packed with great kind of intrigue plot, but only a little bit of romance. It doesn't really read young adult. It reads more adult, and that's what I'm looking for. So I thought I would check out Cassandra Clare. I thought that the premise sounded really interesting. Swordcatcher is the name of a position that this orphan in the court has, but he's like best friends with the prince, and I guess there to protect the prince, be the sword catcher instead of the prince, and get involved with someone else in the city. I'm not going to read too deep because I don't want to come across a spoiler. And the last is a reread. It's Kushiel's Dart. I read this about 10 years ago. The main character, Phaedra, is actually a courtesan slave who is purchased by someone for spying and intrigue. So she is raised learning how to spy. It's very, very political. But even though I say she is a courtesan slave trying to earn money to buy her freedom, the book speaks a lot about, you know, sexuality, and I remember thinking that the world building was really cool. The intrigue was interesting. I really liked Phaedra, but I don't remember a lot else, and I just want to reread this one and see if I want to continue on with this series, because it's the first in the series. And those are the first 24 books that I thought of when I sat down to make my list. No particular order, no particular time. They're just books that I would like to get to in 2024. I'm going to think of this as a loose TBR. I hope that this list helped to inspire you to pick up some of these titles or think about what your reading plans are for the year very, very loosely. I'm not about putting pressure on ourselves to like force ourselves to read things. I don't think that's fun. I'm reading books and making YouTube videos just for fun. If you've read any on this list and want to talk about it, please let me know. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, don't forget to support your local library, which is where I will be getting many of these books from. You know, I didn't say one of them. Use of Weapons, the next book in the Culture series. I'm going to read this year as well. All right. Thanks. Bye.